Imagine casting your ballot from home. It's a convenience that's really radically reshaped how America votes. But does it safeguard our sacred right? Or does it maybe open the door to genuine concern?
That's a huge question, especially right now. I mean, just days ago, President Donald Trump announced plans for an executive order aimed at eliminating mail-in voting. He flat out called it corrupt.
He did, yeah. Said lawyers are already drafting it.
Exactly. And this was during a White House meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky. He said, we're going to start with an executive order to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt.
Wow. And he even brought Putin into it, claiming Putin told him our elections were rigged because of mail-in voting.
He did. And he also invoked former President Jimmy Carter, falsely, as a critic of the method.
Right. And despite these, pretty strong claims, fact-checkers jumped in fast. They noted over 30 countries allow mail voting, and U.S. courts. While they've consistently rejected claims of widespread fraud since 2020.
That's the backdrop. So this isn't just a passing headline. It really reignites a fiery, fundamental debate about our election system's foundation.
Absolutely.
Precisely. So today we're going to take a deep dive into mail-in voting. We'll look at how it evolved, why it's such a hot-button issue, and critically, who actually controls our elections.
And we'll unpack the arguments, right, both sides, but really focusing on those concerns people raise about election integrity, plus what recent state changes mean for, your vote.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with the journey. When we say mail-in voting, we basically mean ballots sent to your home, you fill them out, send them back, or drop them off. It's a kind of absentee ballot, really.
That's right. And its roots go surprisingly deep. This isn't some brand new thing.
Really?
Yeah, absentee voting first popped up in colonial America, mostly for soldiers. Then the Civil War saw its first large-scale use, again for the military.
Huh. So soldiers first.
Right. But then Vermont, interestingly, became the first state to allow civilian absentee voting way back in 1896.
1896? Wow.
Yeah. And by 1938, it was pretty widespread. 42 states allowed it. Nearly 2% of folks voted that way in the 36 election.
So it started small, mainly for necessity, and just kind of grew over a century. But then things really shifted with the no-excuse expansion, didn't they?
They did. Starting in the 1970s, more states began allowing people to vote absentee without needing a specific reason, like being sick or out of town.
Just for convenience, basically.
Pretty much. And that grew steadily. By 2000, it was 21 states, and by 2016, 31 states plus D.C.
And that led to some states going all in, right? The all-mail election.
Exactly. 8 states plus D.C. now primarily conduct elections entirely by mail. Think California, Colorado, Oregon. They pioneered it back in '98. They automatically send ballots to all registered voters.
Okay, so a slow burn, then steady growth, and then 2020 hit.
Boom. Yeah, the COVID-19 pandemic just threw mail-in voting onto center stage almost overnight.
Because people couldn't or didn't want to go to the polls.
Right. So due to emergency measures, 45 states and D.C. allowed no-excuse postal voting. And the numbers, get this, around 43% of Americans cast ballots by mail in 2020.
43%. That's nearly double 2016, right?
Nearly double. A huge rapid shift. Now, its use has dipped since then. About 32% in 2022, maybe around 30% projected for 2024.
Still way higher than before the pandemic, though.
Oh, absolutely. Dramatically higher. As of September 2024, you've still got 36 states and D.C. allowing no-excuse mail voting. Only 14 states require a specific reason now.
Okay, so we've seen this evolution. Quiet start, steady growth, pandemic explosion. But this convenience, it's also ignited a real firestorm. It exposes this fundamental tension between access and integrity.
That's the crux of it. Look, proponents argue it's great for access, helps folks with disabilities, demanding jobs, minority voters.
Yeah.
Makes it easier for more people to participate. Some research even suggests it's partisan neutral.
And they say there are ways to make it secure.
Yeah, proponents contend that, best practices can prevent fraud. Some experts even say fraud is infinitesimally small.
But there's a big but here for opponents, especially from a more conservative viewpoint, right? The core concern is security.
Exactly. The main argument is that mail-in voting is just inherently more vulnerable to fraud than voting in person. Why? Because you don't have that immediate face-to-face ID check at the polling place.
And it's not just a theoretical worry for them.
No. Look at Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Back in 2020, he pointed out that historically, both Democrats and Republicans have acknowledged mail voting increases the likelihood of fraud.
And his office has looked into actual cases.
They have. He mentioned over 300 investigations into mail-in ballot fraud. They cited cases where voters reported being pressured, even harassed, by campaign workers to vote a certain way or just hand over their ballot.
Hand over their ballot. Wow.
Yeah. And there were those criminal election fraud charges in Paterson, New Jersey, related to a mail-in ballot scheme. So opponents say these aren't just hypotheticals, they're real-world examples that, justify skepticism.
That analogy from Hans von Spakovsky at Heritage is pretty powerful too, isn't it? The lottery ticket thing.
It really crystallizes the concern for many. He asks, if you won $500 million, would you just pop that winning ticket in the mail? Of course not.
Right. You'd hand deliver it, probably with security.
Exactly. So he uses that to question why we'd trust something as precious as a ballot to the same system. He argues for the security of polling places, with bipartisan observers, ID checks, preventing coercion right there.
It definitely highlights a perceived vulnerability. What about ballot rejection rates? I've heard those are higher for mail-in votes.
They are, significantly so. In 2020, about 1% of mail ballots got rejected. That sounds small, but compared to in-person votes, the rejection rate there was tiny, like 0.01%.
1% versus 0.01%. That's a big difference. Why are they rejected?
Usually things like the signature not matching what's on file, or maybe it's missing entirely, or the ballot arrived after the deadline.
And does this affect everyone equally?
It seems not. The data shows disparities. For instance, in Florida, young voters, like 18 to 25, had rejection rates of 4 or 5% in 2020. Compare that to just 1% for voters over 60.
4 to 5%. That's huge.
It is. And similar patterns have shown up elsewhere. In Georgia's 2018 election, ballots from Black or Hispanic voters were rejected at higher rates. So it raises questions about not just if votes are counted, but whose votes are counted reliably.
Right. Are we accidentally disenfranchising certain groups through these procedures?
That's a critical question in this debate, and it ties into another major concern, delayed results.
Ah, yes. Waiting days, sometimes weeks, to know who won.
Exactly. Mail ballots don't all arrive at once. They trickle in. Counting takes time, sometimes a long time. Gentry Lange from the No Vote by Mail Project warned it can make elections less accurate, less precise, and require far longer to tabulate. He even said it could take a month or more.
And we saw that play out very dramatically in 2020 with the so-called blue shift.
Right, where initial results on election night, often leaning Republican based on in-person votes, gradually shifted as more mail-in ballots, which leaned Democratic in that election, got counted later.
Pennsylvania was a key example, wasn't it?
It was. They had a tenfold increase in mail ballots, and state law at the time didn't let them start processing those ballots early. So the count dragged on for days.
And that delay, it just creates a vacuum where mistrust and conspiracy theories can breed, right?
Absolutely. It fuels suspicion about what's happening behind closed doors during that extended count.
On top of that, there's just the basic question of relying on the postal system itself.
Yeah, that's another layer. Concerns about ballots getting lost, stolen, delayed. They're not unfounded. When you're talking about millions of votes nationwide, the reliability and security of the delivery system becomes incredibly critical. Is the USPS really equipped for that kind of sensitive, time-bound task on such a massive scale?
Good point. So this national debate has very real consequences on the ground in the states, especially battleground states.
Oh, definitely. Since 2020, we've seen a flurry of legislative action. A lot of it has been aimed at tightening the rules around absentee voting. And these aren't just small tweaks. They can really change how easy or hard it is for you to vote.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Take Arizona. They passed laws making it harder to fix problems with absentee ballot signatures, like if it doesn't quite match. Stricter proof of residence rules, too. And controversially, new criminal penalties for election workers doing, what used to be routine tasks.
Making it riskier to be an election worker.
Some argue it could discourage people, yeah. Then look at Florida. Stricter ID rules for mail ballots, fewer drop boxes available, and they even created a special partisan election police unit.
An election police unit?
Yeah, tasked with investigating supposed irregularities, and they've actually made arrests. It's a pretty significant change in enforcement.
What about Georgia? They were ground zero for a lot of debate.
Georgia made big changes, too. They shortened the window to request a mail ballot, added new ID requirements, cut back on drop box locations and hours. They also changed the state election board to make it more partisan and made it illegal for election officials to accept private grants, which many had used to help run elections in 2020.
And it wasn't just those states, right? North Carolina moved their mail ballot deadline up to Election Day. That would have disqualified thousands of ballots in 2020. They also brought back a photo ID law.
Right. And Texas passed a major bill making it harder to get help if you need assistance with your mail ballot. tougher voter ID rules, limits on early voting options. They even added criminal penalties for poll workers for simple counting errors and allowed partisan oversight of elections in Harris County, their biggest county.
So a clear trend in several key states towards making mail-in and absentee voting more restrictive.
Generally, yes, in many Republican-controlled battleground states.
Yeah.
But it's important to note it's not uniform across the board.
Oh, what's happening elsewhere?
Well, you have states like Michigan and Nevada that actually moved to expand voting access after 2020. Michigan voters approved proposals for things like a permanent mail voter list and prepaid postage on return envelopes.
Making it easier, basically.
Exactly. And Nevada made universal mail voting permanent. They also streamlined rules for polling places and drop boxes, including ensuring access on Native American reservations.
And then some states are just stuck.
Pretty much. Places like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin have seen political gridlock. Divided government means they haven't been able to pass major election law changes since 2020. So issues like allowing pre-processing of mail ballots in PA to speed up the count, still unresolved, which, could mean more delays and mistrust down the line.
This brings us back to a fundamental question then. Who actually gets to decide these rules? We hear President Trump talking about an executive order to eliminate mail-in voting. Can a president even do that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But the Constitution is actually pretty clear here. Article 1, Section 4 of the Elections Clause. It explicitly gives states the primary power to set the times, places, and manner of holding elections.
States have the primary authority, not the federal government, not the president.
Primarily states. Now, Congress does have the power to make or alter such regulations, but the president, no unilateral power over voting and elections.
So what experts say lines up with that?
Absolutely. Professor Nate Persily at Stanford Law put it plainly. The president has no unilateral power over voting and elections. He notes there isn't even a specific right to vote granted in the Constitution itself, just amendments preventing certain kinds of discrimination. Everything else about how elections are run, that's largely up to the states.
So President Trump's talk about an executive order faces pretty big legal hurdles.
Immense hurdles. Courts have consistently and quickly blocked parts of executive orders that tried to unilaterally change federal election rules. They've affirmed over and over that only Congress can make those kinds of federal changes.
What about his claim that states are just agents for the federal government?
Yeah, that claim that states must do what the federal government tells them in elections. That just flies in the face of the Constitution and centuries of practice.
Yeah.
It's not how our system is set up.
And didn't the Supreme Court weigh in on state power recently?
They did.
Ah.
In June 2023, the Moore v. Harper decision was crucial. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the majority opinion, and they explicitly rejected something called the independent state legislature theory.
What did that mean, practically?
It meant they confirmed that state legislatures aren't totally independent when setting election rules. State courts still have the authority to review those rules based on the state's own constitution. It basically reinforced the checks and balances within the states themselves.
So it pushed back against the idea that legislatures could do whatever they wanted regarding federal elections without state court oversight.
Exactly. It reaffirmed that the power over elections is primarily with the states and Congress, operating within constitutional boundaries, including state constitutions. It's a crucial check against any single branch, including the executive, trying to take over the process.
So, bottom line, the power to change election rules rests overwhelmingly with states in Congress, not a presidential pen.
That's the constitutional reality.
Yeah.
And many see that decentralized system itself as a safeguard.
Okay. So wrapping this up, we've seen how mail-in voting went from a niche thing to this massive part of U.S. elections, especially post-pandemic, and it's sparked these really intense debates, haven't they? Balancing access against integrity.
Absolutely. The arguments for expanding access are clear, but the arguments against, focused on security and integrity, they're deeply felt too, particularly among conservatives worried about fraud potential, those ballot rejection issues, and delayed results undermining trust.
And the key takeaways for listeners.
Remember, while mail voting boosted participation, those serious concerns about fraud risk, delays, and mail reliability persist. And critically, the power to change the rules. That lies with your state legislature and Congress, not primarily with the White House. No single executive order can just sweep away state election laws.
So as we head into future elections, this debate isn't going away, which leads to a final thought for you, the listener. What measures do you think are most crucial to make sure every legitimate vote gets counted accurately and transparently, while also keeping public trust strong in our elections?